the BuNine Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, the Grand Admiral, the Prime Minister, and his National Security Advisor discuss the state of the Star Kingdom. Mesons, fermions, and bosons mix it up with wine and cheese to become party-ons. Plus, we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Alliance of Equals by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. All right now. Welcome to the BuNine Free Radio Hour podcast. It's an honor to have you along. I'm BuNine editor Tony Daniel. This time we have part one of a two-part roundtable discussion with David Weber and members of a couple of fan organizations devoted to his work. We have the head of the Royal Manticoran Navy, Grand Admiral Martin Lessum, and Christopher Weuve, the current director of BuNine, the Universe Consulting Group, along with Arius Kaufmann, another BuNine member, who thinks about the societal regulation and monetary arrangements within the Universe. And finally, we have Anton Peterson, a fan, author, science fiction convention liaison with decades of experience. This group will discuss the relationship of an author with his fans and readers and the give and take that results. Here, using the special case, and maybe the ideal case, since they all do it so well, of David Weber and his fandom and readership. You might even call this a best practices seminar. So that's coming up. And we continue with the complete audiobook serialization of Sharon Lee and Steve Miller's Liaden Universe novel, Alliance of Equals. Now here's the news. Believe it or not, April showers bring May hardcovers and trade paperback originals. Yes. Next Tuesday, the BuNine May new books appear at booksellers everywhere. Tuesday happens to be May 1st, but new books in general appear at the bookstores on the first Tuesday of each month anyway. Why this should be requires an advanced degree, and who really cares in the explanation is kind of boring anyway, which is a vast subject area that covers many other topics also. Anyway, new at booksellers is Uncharted by Kevin J. Anderson and Sarah A. Hoyt. This is book one in the Arcane America series. A new world, new magic, and new history. After Halley's Comet was destroyed in a magical battle in 1759, the backlash separated the entire New World from the Old in an event known as the Sundering. Now isolated from the rest of the globe, America has become a very different place where magic works and history has been changed forever. It's 1803, a new 1803. Young Meriwether Lewis, footloose and intrigued, goes to hear a lecture in St. Louis by venerated old wizard Benjamin Franklin. Franklin's talk is disrupted by the attack of a winged, fire-breathing beast, much like the legend from Lewis's own Welsh heritage. In the aftermath, Franklin tells the young man that he knows of a great growing evil that lurks in the uncharted arcane territories west of the Mississippi. Franklin commissions Lewis and his own talented partner, William Clark, to embark on a remarkable voyage of exploration, to meet and document the indigenous tribes, to find a route all the way to the Pacific Ocean and perhaps beyond the magical veil to Europe again, and to stop the growing evil that is filling the American West. Also out in May is Oblivion by Steve White and Charles E. Gannon. This is the latest entry in the long-running and popular Starfire series, originally created by Steve White and David Weber. Stand against the alien invader apocalypse. The war with the profoundly alien Arduans has ended, and the Arduans have come to call humanity their allies. Most of them, that is. The Arduan warrior caste refuses to accept defeat. Now known as the Kaituni, they are waging a war of extermination against all members of the Pan-Sentient Union, human and Arduan alike. What's more, the Kaituni have an unexpected weapon in their arsenal, the alien arachnids, once thought driven to extinction. The Kaituni push the arachnid fleet ahead of them, inflicting untold damage. The odds look bleak, but Admiral Ian Trevain and Commodore Ossian Weathermere have faced down long odds in the past. It's time to take a stand for Earth, for humanity, and for the Pan-Sentient Union. Uncharted by Kevin J. Anderson and Sarah A. Hoyt, and Oblivion by Steve White and Charles E. Gannon are available May 1st, Tuesday, at booksellers everywhere. This is part one of a two-part interview. Part two will be available on next week's podcast. I want to welcome to the podcast David Weber, Christopher Weuve, Martin Lessum, Anton Peterson, and Arius Kaufmann. Hi, guys.
Hello. Hi. Hello. Hello.
So we are going to bring to our listeners a roundtable discussion this time on the podcast. We know that the most important interaction with an author, that is, an author of books, is the reader who reads a book written by that author. But what about when it goes beyond that? What about the case when a reader becomes so interested in the world the author has created, the culture he's illustrated, and the characters he's brought to life, that there's a desire to take it farther or further, or whichever one is the right one. Perhaps to interact with the author. Definitely to interact with others who feel and think the same way. And then there's the author, who experiences this wash of interest, even obsession, in his readers and fans. What do we make of this? What do we do with this? How does it become a good or even a very, very good thing? Which I think in this test case, which we will examine here, it has. To talk about this, we brought together an amazing group. First of all, we have David Weber, the creator of the Honor Harrington series and the Honorverse, within which it is set. This is a multiple New York Times best-selling series. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of fans and readers out there. And with us are folks who are kind of the apex of David Weber fans and readers and people interested in the Honorverse. And I'd like to sort of have you folks introduce yourself. Tell us who you are in the Weber continuum, and maybe tell us also your secret identity in real life, because I've so many times been amazed at some of the backgrounds of David Weber fans and readers. Just some cool folks out there that are into his stuff. So can we maybe start with Chris, who's involved with BuNine, right, Chris?
Right. So I'm Chris Weuve. I'm one of the founders of BuNine, which is the technical analytic visualization group that supports David. So when David says, like, I need to figure out how this particular thing I've been writing about for 10 years actually works, we're the guys who can figure that out, and we can draw pictures of it and do all sorts of things like that. In my day job, I've been a professor at I'm a naval analyst, and I used to be a wargame designer. I'm a former professor at the Naval War College, where I was in the wargaming department, and before that I was at the Center for Naval Analysis, where I was a wargame designer, and I also had this collateral duty of every now and then I get to go off on aircraft carriers and destroyers and cruisers and watch the Navy do exercises and help tell them what actually happened afterwards. And so I got pulled into the David Weber Honor Harrington orbit actually through a bunch of people that were hardcore Honor Harrington fans that were sort of being brought together by a game designer who was trying to make a movie. So if you want to diagram that out, there's a lot of weird connections here.
But this is exactly what I mean. Just some the sort of high-powered individual who is also a fan in this particular group. What about you, Martin Lessum?
Martin Lessum. So in this particular group, I am the founder of the Royal Manticoran Navy, which is the official Honor Harrington fan association. We're a group of about 5,000-ish people worldwide who all gotten together for our love of David's books. In my secret identity, real life, I am an attorney who does regulatory affairs for pharmaceutical companies, so I help them deal with governmental agencies. I'm a former naval officer and just a guy who likes to read a lot of science fiction books.
What is your title in the RMN, by the way?
I am the first. So I am the first Lord of the Admiralty is the official title in the fan universe. From a corporate perspective, I'm the president and chairman of the board.
What is David's title in the RMN? Or is it God?
So David has two official titles. David is either referred to as the creator, or he is referred to as the prime minister.
And we're talking about the fan club and not the actual RMN, which doesn't exist either in David Weber's books.
Oh, yes, it does.
Oh, well, actually, both of them sort of do, I guess. And what about you, Anton?
Hi there, this is Anton Peterson. I have been working with both BuNine and I'm a member of the RMN under Martin, which is a lot of fun. I got involved with the David Weber Universe because one of my secret identities is that I work at a number of conventions, both science fiction and Japanese anime, and I was David's liaison back in 2006. So I have been staffing conventions now for about 20 years. So the organization utilizes me because I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a fan of David since basically the early 90s.
Have you been involved with the two sort of honor-based conventions, HonorCon and Manticon?
Yes, I assisted with the first HonorCon that came out, in charge of the guests there, and that's what I do specifically. And for Manticon, I've been also in charge of guest relations there as well.
And Arius, how about you, Arius Kaufmann?
Neck of the woods.
I joined BuNine back in 2009-ish. Largely, my area of expertise has more to do with human terrain, such as socio-political constructs, legal systems, economics, that kind of thing. In real life, I actually have gone through several careers, including during the 90s, I was network admin and web software engineer, and then I became a naval analyst at the Center for Naval Analysis, and I have since left and have gotten my master's in education so I can teach.
We had a long conversation about your desire to teach at a dinner one time. It was really cool to talk to you about that. So, David, what do you think when these sorts of individuals gather around?
Well, when these sorts of individuals gather around, I check to make sure I'm armed. I mean, no. These are really cool people. There are fans out there who are. There are some who probably genuinely are on the obsessive edge and sometimes a little scary. There are some who just don't give you very much room to breathe when they're with you. The fans that I love the most are the ones who are obviously invested in the books and who love the characters, but who are not in the rarefied 0.5% of geekiness where social interaction is not on the agenda. That sounds bad, and I don't mean it to, because all of us who are involved in science fiction and fandom, we are geeks, or we wouldn't be there, okay? But every so often you hit somebody who has latched onto a given universe, a given series, and this is sort of what gives their life meaning. And I remember my daughter Morgan talking about a young guy who was saying to her, "Boy, I'm so glad I met you. I've got friends and everything." She turned around to my wife Sharon and said, "Mom, I don't want to be his everything, because that's not good for him." I'm speaking about the fan here, not the particular kid in question. It's not good for the fan, and it's hard on the writer to have somebody who has pretty much wrapped their entire life around a construct that you have put together. Now, none of the folks that we've got here on the podcast tonight are anywhere near that crowd. These are, I think you call them the apex, and in a lot of ways that's absolutely true. These are people who are deeply invested in the books. Some of them have actually read them. At least one hasn't, but we won't go there. But they're involved in the nuts and bolts of the universe, okay? And that's always really gratifying to the writer because somebody cares enough, to get involved in the nuts and bolts. In a way, even when somebody writes you a letter to say it doesn't work that way, the fact that they got deeply involved enough to say, it doesn't work that way is gratifying. But I have said many times that the thing that gives me the most gratification about the books is the quality of my readers. Okay, I know I've got some readers out there somewhere who are probably jerks. I haven't actually met them. I've met people who spend a lot of time contributing to things like Big Cat Rescue, which is one of the TRMN's charities, or to veteran support organizations. I've got a couple of fans who are deeply involved in food bank projects and animal rescue projects. These are really, really worthwhile people. And if those people like your books, then it's a validation that you must be doing something right. I think that probably is the best way any fan can pay a writer back, is to be the kind of person, give the kind of opportunity to say, you know what, my readers are good people.
It's and we did want to mention, maybe we should talk about that a little bit. The way that Martin's group in particular has raised some dough for these for this charity, which is an incredibly cool thing anyway in itself. The Big Cat Rescue. Martin, do you want to address that?
Sure. So, it really started because we had a member who came to me and said, hey, there's this bobcat that's been injured. And she said, is there anything that we as a group can do? And I thought about it for a few minutes. And I'd had some concept work at this point from BuNine on what the tree cats in David Weber's universe look like. They're these arboreal, six-legged cats with prehensile tails. And if you look at the face of a tree cat and you look at the face of a bobcat, they're very similar. So we figured, you know what, this is actually probably a good way for us to do something that has that connection to the books and that a lot of our members can get really behind. So we started sponsoring this cat at Big Cat Rescue, and quite honestly, it's snowballed from there. We've managed to raise just about $2 million worth in cash and equipment for them in about the last 7 years, I think.
Really? Holy moly, that's a lot of dough.
Yeah,
the TRMN. Go ahead, Martin.
Yeah, I was going to say, so a lot of that's also in equipment. We managed to get some veterinary schools to donate aging equipment to them that they're no longer using because they wanted cutting-edge equipment. So we got them to donate some of that, and probably I'd say most of it's in equipment, and we've raised probably about $30,000 total in cash.
One of the features of a lot of cons, and certainly of ones that the TRMN is associated with, is the charity auction, in which items are sold, and the proceeds go to the charity being sponsored by the con. And the last Honor Con, we raised, what, Martin? Wasn't it like 12,000, something like that, from the charity?
Yeah, 12,000-ish, yeah.
Yeah, and that was Rising Grace. Have I got that right, Martin? It's an organization. Saving Grace. Okay, it's an organization that combines rescue dogs and vets. It rescues dogs, trains them as support dogs, trains the vets who need support dogs, and then pairs them. and it's just a really, really, really good cause. And this is in addition to everything they've done for Big Cat Rescue. Honorverse fans tend to be generous.
I mean, this seems to be something on the order of what some of the old community organizations would do. You know, people that are interested in something like giving speeches like The Optimist or what have you, and they would adopt a charity. You've done something like that, right, Martin?
Yes. I mean, so one of the things that we've done, because we also run, or used to run HonorCon until this was the last year, and Manticon, which is the last year this year. But we're starting up a new one called SphinxCon in Atlanta. But what we used to do was every other year they had Big Cat Rescue as their charity, and then the next year they chose a local charity. So we had, we've had local cancer charities, we've had youth charities, we've had things like Saving Grace Canines, and this way we've always managed to give something to Big Cat Rescue every year, plus we've had at least one or two others that we do stuff for. One of our members does marathon runs for charity every year, multiple marathon runs. So,
how many people are in the Royal Manticoran Navy fan group?
I'm going to say 5,000-ish. It's like 5,200-ish maybe at the moment.
Yeah, that's crazy. And you're divided into ships.
Yes, so each local chapter is what would be considered a ship in the Royal Manticoran Navy or one of the other space navies that are part of the group. It's a fun way to sort of give each person an identity.
The Graysons, the Havenites, yeah.
It would. I mean, it's probably helpful that the actual group in David's books has a hierarchical organization and has ships. It seems a natural way to organize yourself.
Easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly makes it easier.
Yeah.
So.
Well, okay, but Tony, between the ship, the local chapter level, there and the apex of the organization, there are also fleets that cover geographical areas that then the ships are individual chapters within. So, for example, here in the Southeast, it's Third Fleet. And technically,
Correct.
Sharon and the kids and I are all members of Third Fleet and members of the crew of HMS Duke of Cromarty, which is the royal yacht. But it's not just a gold-plated ship. It's a fully operational tear-your-face-off battle cruiser. So, it's not like we're on wusses here, But, yeah, that's part of the flavor of the organization.
Yeah, I would actually say that the only member that's not on a chapter, and that's by choice, is myself.
Mm-hmm.
This way it's easy for me to sort of interact with every chapter and be quote unquote part of every chapter without being specifically belonging to one.
Well, what does the chapter do other than attend conventions?
So it varies from chapter to chapter. For example, we have multiple chapters around the country that do gaming. We have multiple chapters around the country that do charity events. We have some that do things like movie nights. There's at least one chapter that every year basically cycles through both the Horatio Hornblower and Sharp's Rifle series as an example. So it's up to each individual chapter sort of what they want to do as a group.
Yeah, Sharon and the kids and I just had dinner last night with as many members of the Duke of Cromarty as could get there at one of our local Red Bull restaurants. And we've done movies, and then there's been the reading challenge, Martin, which was kind of organization wide, with members of the organization competing for total number of words read in a year, and I I unfortunately got involved with I think 12-volume history, which I read all of. So I had a lot of words to turn in that year.
You're naturally competitive.
We try to encourage things like that are group events, and so in the books there's I believe it's the Queen's Gunnery Challenge, the Black Sphinx Cup. So that's sort of what this is. We have a way for chapters to sort of compete against each other in a friendly manner, and it's multiple challenges throughout the year. One of them is a reading challenge. One of them is, usually around the holidays, it's charity drives or Toys for Tots. One of them might be, going out and doing physical activities, and it's.
And don't forget the Horizons Bridge Simulator.
Right. There's the Horizons Bridge Simulator part of it as well. And we try to do things that encourage people to do things together and to pool their resources.
And you do a little costuming.
To be very much like a family.
You do a little costuming too.
We do quite a bit of costuming.
Some more than others, yes.
Yeah.
Exact.
Well, okay. At Manticoran next month, Sharon and we just renewed our wedding vows after our 20th anniversary on Saturday. Some of you were here for that. And we will be renewing our vows again with our fan family at Manticoran. And it's going to be a full-bore cosplay event with the Grand Duke and Grand Duchess exchanging vows. And it should be kind of cool.
Well, that's cool. Manticoran is in Minneapolis, and it's coming up at the end of May.
Correct. Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah. And it's really the Honorverse Con that sucked Anton in to begin with. He was part. Okay, Sharon and I met Anton, like he said, years ago, and we have come to rely on him for a lot of things in a lot of ways. But he is especially active in Condom in the Minneapolis area, where he bears responsibility. It is his fault that I was ever taken to a Mongolian barbecue in the first place. All right.
We did.
It is all his fault. His fault. Okay. I just thought I'd get that on the record.
And we shall do so again.
He is an enabler in that respect.
Sounds like you have a little Mongolian.
That is actually my job, is to enable.
Barbecue habit there, David. So, tell us, Anton, what is it like to be? You call yourself an author liaison. What does that mean? What do you do? And what's it like to interact with David and with other authors?
Okay, well, basically,
go ahead,
a liaison is nothing more. Yeah. Basically, an author liaison and a liaison in general is to take care of the guest of honor. Their job is to make sure they get to their programs on time, to make sure they eat, apparently, Con's Mongolian barbecue a lot, to make sure they're taken care of. So, working with David has been an absolute joy. He tends to talk a little much, so sometimes we have to mention to him that his panel is now done. But he actually is really good to work with. Yeah, that never happens. No, he's one of the better guests that I've worked with, just because he's so friendly with the attendees. I've worked with, go ahead, which he never does.
I'm sorry.
I've worked with a number of authors that are like.
So, how are you involved with Manticoran in particular, Anton?
Well, like David said, I'd met him at another science fiction convention called Convergence. I think it was 2006, where I was his liaison at my choice because, again, I was a very large fan of David. I don't think David believed I'd actually read any of his books at that point, and I had read them all. But I was able to work with him that weekend.
Because you have an honest faith.
He does have an honest face, doesn't he? Who knows what lurks behind there?
Exactly. I have them all fools. No, I don't. Unfortunately, I am very honest in that respect. But when Manticon and HonorCon started coming together, it was decided that I could be, help out HonorCon in the first year especially. And then, of course, Manticon is here. So it's, about 2 miles from where I live. So being involved in that was no problem. I actually do about 10 to 12 type of events here. So this is where all my vacation from my actual day job goes.
Yeah, let me say, guest liaisons, minders, they come in 3 flavors. One is the I could stand to do that again flavor. One is the my God, what was the con thinking flavor, and the other is hey, this really clicked flavor. Anton falls into the last category. He knows his way around. He is unfailingly helpful, and he is always on top of the schedule and where you need to be and when you need to be. At some big cons, if you don't have a minder, you can't even find the panel room, much less make your schedule. I mean, these are the mega cons like Dragon Con and whatnot. But I have never been to a con where Anton was my liaison, where I didn't feel that I knew exactly what was going on. Okay, that I could rely on Anton to get me where I needed to be and get me there when I needed to be there, and to look after Sharon, okay, which with her spinal surgeries and whatnot is a not insignificant part of the puzzle. But I've been at cons where I had liaisons and I didn't know if they knew what they were doing. Okay, who they're constantly checking the schedule themselves and saying, I'm not sure where we're supposed to be. Okay, Anton, even if he doesn't have a clue where you're supposed to be, he says, oh yeah, I know where we're going. And you feel so confident that that doesn't matter.
Exactly.
As long as we're singing Anton's praises, if I could come in real quick to sing Anton's praises also. So this is Chris again. And so the very first HonorCon was hosted by BuNine in 2013 in Greenville, and it was somewhat of a different con, and we weren't really interested in being in the long-term con running business, so we turned it over to TRMN because they're a 5,000 person organization. We're like a 20-person organization. But before we went to that con, Tom Pope and I went to DemiCon, where David was going to be the guest of honor. DemiCon is a small con in Des Moines, Iowa, which happens to be where I am from. And my brother goes to this con all the time. And so when we heard David was going to be the guest of honor, it's like, yeah, we need to go there. And they had recruited Anton to be David's handler at DemiCon. So that's where BuNine met Anton. And I remember at one point very early on, Tom and I sort of said, yeah, we need this guy. We need him to come and be David's handler at the first HonorCon, and so and it was a perfect decision. And so now we've brought him into BuNine because BuNine has to do liaison work with like the fan club, et cetera, and so it's always good to have somebody who's really good about fulfilling that role. So he's been fantastic at that.
To continue to sing Anton's praises, one of the roles that he has in TRMN is actually as one of our ombudsmen, to reach out to the general members so that they have a place they can go that's not necessarily myself. It's not necessarily, one of the quote-unquote rarefied heights, if you will, that if they have issues or problems, they have someone they can go speak to who they feel comfortable talking to, who can then bring those problems to us and we can begin to fix them. And Anton does a pretty good job of that, and it's something that I personally can't sing his praises enough for. So.
Well, I would, and that actually, in order to let Anton off the hook a little bit here, because I know how we're,
thank you, please.
hammering in this really way awkward. Has to be terrible. But one of the things that the TRMN is very, very, very good about is they really look after Sharon and me and the kids when they're at a con. If we have the kids with us at a regional con and the TRMN is there, we've got 11 more uncles and 12 more aunts to kind of help keep an eye on things. But one of the things that gets kind of interesting when you have an organization this size is that on the one hand, Martin and the organization as a whole have been really, really good about protecting Sharon and my privacy. It's not like just because you're a member of the TRMN, go ahead and call Dave, anytime you want, because we are private people, and we have lives that we have to deal with. I'm a little bit behind on the current book. I know that's going to be difficult for anyone to believe, but it's true. At the same time, however, we make personal friends and connections within the organization as we meet people. And those people become part of our regular circle of friends. And so in some ways, the author is it's not an awkward position, but in a kind of one step to the side of what I guess you would call full two-way communication.
How do you mean, David? Explain that some more. That's very.
Let me put it this way. I have a fan who shall remain nameless. Okay, who is scary. All right. In terms of just how obsessed he seems to be with the books and the characters, and with me as the creator of the characters, and who we know has wandered by the house on occasion, even though he's not from around here. That kind of situation is the downside of fandom. When you encounter someone like that, or like the person who was after Misty Lackey because her Guardians novels he felt were endangering him because he was a Guardian. You meet fans like that and you go, oh my God, kind of thing. What the TRMN does is it provides an avenue for people who are not the loony fringe, but who really are deeply invested in the books and the organization. It gives them a group that they can join and that they can share their interest with that has official access to me and to Sharon and to the universe. Sharon and I really try hard to interact with the fans. Sharon is more of our social presence than I am because I stay away from social media because of the time sink aspect of it. And yet there's a filter in there in which the fans are always, the TRMN is always painstakingly careful about respecting our privacy as well. And that's a difficult balance to strike.
So I can speak to that a little bit because it's one of the things that, because David and Sharon both are such wonderful people, and they're so giving of their time. We felt it very important early on to put a rule in place that, if you're going to go and, discuss, general, how's the weather, how's the kids, you're their close personal friend, go for it. Have all the fun in the world that you want, as long as it's reciprocated, obviously. But don't, we're fans, and I hate to say it this way. We have people who get into the minutia of things. So, don't go and bother David and Sharon with the minutia details. Leave that to us to work out. And if there's an issue that we need their input on, we'll reach out from an organizational perspective from my office or from one of the other senior offices and say, hey, this is a question that came up. Can we get some guidance on this?
Mm-hmm.
And
we
try to enforce that.
Martin. Yeah.
We try to enforce that to give you guys, the space that you deserve.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Well, I have to say, I get from totally outside the TRMN. I got a question the other day that was PM'd to me on my website, and they wanted to know what embroidery knot Grayson uses when it's doing when their seamstresses are embroidering the tabards. It's one thing if somebody says, okay, I'm going to cosplay somebody from thus and so, could you give me any details and so forth and so forth and so on. But when somebody wants to know what embroidery stitch is being used, first of all, it's a very strange author who could answer that question off the top of his head. It's not like we sit there and say, well, yes, it's the overhand two-loop flying swan embroidery stitch,
That is true, David, but on the other hand, if any author could answer that, it might probably be you.
I know we're talking about the Honorverse right now, but I actually got a pass on the info dumps from somebody in another series because it was the Safehold series. And they say, well, of course, he has to explain it there. And I'm like, okay, but I have to explain it over here, too, so you know what's happening. And they're like, not so much. I'm like,
hey, well, I was just talking more about your obsessive making details work out that some authors are lied over, not so much that you take 15 pages to never mind. So
well, okay.
But as you have said often before, every goddamn bit of that you leave out so much stuff, and that every bit of exposition in a Weuve novel gets used somewhere. Part of the story.
Well, I like to think so. I'm sure some of it gets away from me, but the thing is that the person who's really to blame for this, in a lot of ways, is Annie McCaffrey, because my starting point when I build a literary world is Pern. I remember when I was reading it in analog and reading the first novel in Dragonflight, in serialization in analog when I was in high school, many millennia ago. I remember the day that it dawned on me that there was a whole world behind this story. Okay? I'm not saying that I'd already encountered, for God's sake, Tolkien. Okay? And if you want to talk about your compulsive world builder, there you go. But Annie gave me that sense that there's this whole world back there, and it's when you peel the curtain aside a little bit and let the reader see some of the bone and the sinew in the world, that it truly becomes a living, breathing thing for them. And I have always loved world building. Back in my gaming days, they always made me be the game master. Can't imagine why. And I'm a historian at heart. And so putting together all the bits and pieces is one of the most enjoyable exercises for me in building the world that my characters are going to inhabit. And if you build the world, you define the nature of the challenges and the tools that they have to meet those challenges. And there are times, my feeling is, and some people like this and some people don't like this, my feeling is that the reader has to know what the menu of choices for the characters are to appreciate the decisions the characters make. And that means you have to show them enough of the hardware, of the strategic problem, of the information flow, or whatever, for you to really understand why they're doing what they're doing. And there are a couple of books that I would like to get back to edit a little more tightly, that because of production time constraints or because of health issues on my part, I didn't edit as tightly as I should have. And when you have, God, I don't know how many I've got out now, a bunch. But when you've got that many books out, you've got a lot of exposure for having had an off day. You know what I'm saying here. And there are times when I wish I had given a little less detail. But it's the detail that's there, even when you don't see it, that provides the continuity and the sense of depth.
Well, but you have said also before that you've done so much, particularly in the Honorverse and in particular, that even you can't really hold it all in your head. And this is where this very interesting group of readers became very useful to you, and that would be BuNine. And maybe Chris and Arius can talk a little bit about how that process, and David, of course, jumping in when to elucidate.
So I'd like to start off on that by going back to something David said very early on, when he said that one of us hadn't read the books. I believe he was referring to me.
I wasn't going to say anything.
And that is a statement that is no longer true and hasn't been true for several years, but he is making fun of the fact that for years, the early years of BuNine, I actually had not read any of the Anna Harrington stuff. I had been a big fan of a bunch of David's other work, and when I had bought everyone when they came out, and I had bought the first one when it came out, and it was clear that it was the beginning of a new series, and I thought I'll let him get a couple of books into it. And next thing I knew, there was 50 books in the series and a new one coming out every 6 weeks. At least that's what it seemed. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, no, actually, Chris, let me interject something here.
Okay.
One thing that meant was that Chris asked questions that people who had read all the books didn't ask because they thought they knew the answers, and that was very useful.
And I still spend time doing that. So yeah, I got involved because I had spent a lot of time hanging out at sea with the United States Navy, and as a result, during the BuNine sort of coalesced around a bunch of people that had contacted Ken Burnside, who was doing whose game company was publishing the board game that was set in the Anna Harrington universe. And Ken then turned to us when somebody who was going to try to make a movie in that universe wanted some ideas about look and feel and how does the Navy do things, et cetera, so that he could make his material as realistic as possible. And at some point, we had spent enough time talking to each other via email that we said, hey, let's get together in person. And so that's what we ended up doing. Now, one of our members, one of the other founders, Tom Pope, is our sort of de facto official archivist.
Yes.
And he's, so he's got pretty much files on everything. And a lot of times, we'll get a request from the fan club because we we pass stuff on to the fan club. And so we'll get a request. It's like, there's this wrench that was mentioned in this one particular book, and it was specifically this left-handed wrench. Do you guys know what that looks like? I'll pass it on to Tom, and Tom goes, oh, yeah, I've got like 4 pages of sketches of the wrench. Now, that's obviously an exaggerated example, but it's not unusual for Tom to have spent some time sketching things out. Maybe Thomas Maroney, one of the other artists in the group, has done some sketches as well. And Tom is the guy who keeps all that stuff together. Now, we have an internal wiki where we try to keep together all of our textual notes, but a lot of the stuff we do is not textual, and almost all of that rests in Tom's hands. We do have kind of a knowledge management problem that we're constantly wrestling with, primarily because all the members of BuNine have day jobs. And so what we're doing is we can sort of fit in between the other things that we do. So let's see. Arius, do you have anything that you want to add to that process?
Yeah, a lot of what happens in BuNine is we have really long conversations with each other about topics that Dave has asked us to take a look at. I spent an awful lot of one HonorCon in a room with Stephen Ryder just discussing the economic system in the Honorverse, and that a lot of stuff gets hashed out before we even talk to Dave to either answer a question or to ask questions for stuff that might need clarification.
Yeah.
In fact, we actually... I was going to say, we actually have a policy that whenever possible, we've fully had that conversation before going to David with a question. And the reason why is because, since we try to do a very deliberate process. We've got a lot of people who've read the material. They can cite stuff chapter and verse. We can go back and double check everything. We can pull things from disparate books and try to figure out how it all fits together. And once we've done that, when we go to David, we try to be able to say, here's the question, and here's what we think the answer might be based upon what you've written. Because we don't ever want to put David in a situation where he's going to give an off-the-cuff answer on something that he has not had a lot of time to go back and check his notes and think about, et cetera, et cetera. Because I'm sure this will shock everybody. David will give an off-the-cuff answer. He usually doesn't say, let me think about that and get back to you. So we've learned that we need to be deliberative about that.
Well, and I tend to do that more with BuNine than I do with other people, to say, let me get back to you on that. Or say, let me check with Tom, and I'll get back to you on that. Tom, for his sins, is the one who has to put up with the most David having an ooh shiny moment while we're talking about something. We'll be talking about... Tom and I have had a lot of very deep... in terms of the detail involved and the how does this get to the inner workings of the political system or whatever. Tom and I have probably had more of those discussions than anyone else because he is.
We're talking about Tom Pope, who is a co-author also on a Call to Vengeance, which is just out.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and also because of the fact that he is the collaborator with Tim and me on the Manticore Ascendant books. So he is in as much as his time crunch permits, he is very, very much front and center in this. And for example, while I was working on Uncompromising Honor, one of the things that I had pulled up on my second computer here in the office was the spreadsheet that Tom has done on every named class of ship in the Honorverse, so that I could flip over there and look at it to be connected with this is the number of missile launchers, this is the number of the point defense centers, this is the complement of the ship, at the maximum acceleration rate, etc. all in one place. And when you have been writing a series for 25 years, there's a lot of ship classes, there's a lot of background information there, and I really, really want, it's one of the things that's important to me, to get the continuity as tight as I can. BuNine has been a godsend in that respect. And as Arius was saying about the economic side of it and so forth, every member of BuNine has his or her own strength, own special piece of knowledge and expertise to bring to the project. Like Mark Gudis doing the law codes, like Chris and the essay, Chris, that you did on the underlying assumptions and tasks of the Royal Manticoran Navy. There are things that I have in the back of my head that are part of the underlying structure that I've never articulated because I never needed to in writing the stories. But they have to be articulated for someone who wants the stories explained to them, if you see the distinction that I'm making here. And BuNine has been just fantastic about helping to pull that stuff out of the back of my mind and refine it with their input, their very large input in some cases because of the expertise they bring to it, to bring it to a fully realized facet of the Universe and then fit it into place in those archives that Tom keeps.
We should also say that a lot of the earlier work that BuNine did has been collected, and you can get it as a book out there, which is House of Steel, the Universe Companion.
Yeah. Well, and we are still planning on, in our copious free time, getting at least 2 more companions out. If you look at the companion, House of Steel, the novella in the front, I call it a novella. Other people call it a novel, but the story in the front, that's all me. The vast majority of the material in there is not me. It's the members of BuNine in the areas that they were responsible for and that they had expertise, with me writing shotgun, but them doing the lion's share of the work. Me and being
the cutting room floor too.
Oh yeah,
we left stuff on the cutting room floor because we had a word limit, and there was like for instance, we gave ship descriptions, ship class histories, et cetera. We have weapon system descriptions that are very similar to that, and have long-term plans to do something with that. We haven't quite figured out yet what, because before we do that, we have to do House of Lies, which because we support David so tightly, when David had a bad case of life happen to him, we decided that we would have a bad case of life happen to us too at the same time, because it's more efficient for all of us to be able to not get things done than for one or the other of us to be holding things up. So I think everybody's getting to the case where we're...
But Chris, at least I was only nipping in and out of... I was only nipping in and out of emergency rooms once in the middle of all that, unlike other people. But that's true. I did have 4 trips to the emergency room in 1 week, but everything's great now. So yeah, it's all better. It's all better. One thing that I'm thinking, and I really haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss this with Chris and Tom, but one thing that I'm thinking is after we have House of Lies and House of Shadows done, we might do a ebook only version where we take some of that stuff from the cutting room floor and offer it to the hardcore aficionado in photons rather than dead tree. But the biggest problem is, to be totally honest, time. I have discovered I turn 2/3 of the number of the beast in October. I get the first 2 6s. And I've discovered that at 66, I really and truly cannot write 750,000 words a year anymore. Go figure. And I think that what I've been doing lately, Uncompromising Honor is an example, I think it's probably as good as anything I've ever done. But
the production volume isn't there, which means that the time isn't there to do stuff around the edges the way that I used to.
Well, maybe, David, after you get your prologue shot, things will pick up a little.
I still remember the person who said,
maybe after David, the kids go off to college.
that may be.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
equivalent.
That probably will help when the soccer schedule goes away and whatnot. But it's I'm honestly thinking, for example, the collaborations with Tim and Tom. They're letting me tell a part of the Honorverse story that there's no way in the world I'd have time to tell on my own. I mean, the dark would come down, before I got there, and that's really in a sense kind of where I am with Joel, who, by the way, I met through BuNine, Joel Presby, in the Hell's Gate series.
Who's continuing the Hell's Gate multiverse, what have you? And that's cool series.
She and I need to get together in my copious free time and get that one done too. But what's not to like about wizards and steampunk? Okay, I mean,
they even fight each other.
Yeah, well, my favorite thing is the wizards who panic when they run into the guys with the steampunk. It's like, wait, you mean you don't need a wizard to fire magic bolts? But I just
so
I think that go ahead.
The fan groups and particularly BuNine in this case has become part of the creation process for you.
They really have. I think it would be fair to say that there's no question that this is my universe, and that for better or for worse, where it goes is up to me. But in terms of a sounding board, to help me feel my way into where I want to go, in terms of somebody who can help me put together the nuts and the bolts behind the concept that I want to work with, they are just invaluable. And anytime that you're in a discussive situation about something like this, the information flows two ways. The input flows two ways. So even though the skeleton of the Honorverse is definitely my own now, the muscle and the sinew, those are a lot more of a joint project between me and BuNine. The simple fact that they help me keep track all by itself would be huge, because it really cuts down the amount of time that I spend going through novels saying, now, where did I put that? Where did I put that? Where did I put that? But it goes so far beyond that. It goes to Bill working on the communications protocol. It goes to Andy's essay on armor and missile design. All of those are bricks that are provided to me by BuNine that I can then put into the edifice wherever I need them. And like I say, you cannot put a price tag on something like that. You just can't do it.
And they're just, the people that want to get involved with are quality quality intellects, which you might not always find in every interest group.
Well, Sharon said something to me a couple of years ago that I hadn't really thought about. But she said, David, one of the reasons you attract the readers that you do is because you don't write down to them. And I'm saying, what are you talking about? And she said, you expect them to keep up with you. And they respect that. And they react to it. And I thought, for somebody stupid enough to marry me, you're really insightful. But I think that's probably true. And the BuNine guys are the perfect example of how that works. When the right eye reads the words, you get BuNine.
That was part 1 of a 2-part interview. Part 2 will be available on next week's podcast. This is another entry in Alliance of Equals, a Liaden Universe novel by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. Beset by the angry remnants of the Department of the Interior and challenged at every turn by opportunists on their new homeworld of Surebleak, and low on funds, Clan Corval desperately needs to reestablish its position as one of the top trading clans in known space. To this end, Master Trader Sean Yoskalen and Corval's premier trade ship Dutiful Passage is on a mission to establish new business associations and to build a strong primary route that links well with existing loops and secondary routes. But reestablishing trade and preserving the lives of the few remaining members of the clan aren't all of Corval's problem. Matters come to a head as Dutiful Passage, accustomed to being welcomed and feted at those ports on its call list, finds itself denied docking and blacklisting while agents of the DOI mount armed attacks on others of Corval's traders under the very eyes of port security systems. Traveling with Dutiful Trader on this unsettling journey is Paddy Yoskalen, the master trader's heir and his apprentice. Paddy is eager to make up for time lost due to Corval's unpleasantness with the Department of the Interior, but she is also keeping a secret so intense that her coming of age and perhaps her very life is threatened by it. And here is the latest entry in Sharon Lee and Steve Miller's Alliance of Equals.
Paddy put the last of the cards down on the table and reached for her teacup. "We have only 3 calls to make tomorrow," she said, "and the locations are practically next door to each other. Thank you for verifying that Master Zeldner does have a shop on port." "You're quite welcome. Do you have a plan of action for tomorrow?" "I will call the contacts tomorrow as soon as business opens and arrange appointments early in the day. I propose we make our cold calls in Beesbrickle section around those appointments. Take the light rail to Frost section and make cold calls there." "And eat lunch?" Father asked. "And eat lunch," she agreed. "Well, it seems a sound enough plan. I leave the details in your capable hands. Now, will you join me at the window for a glass of wine and a discussion of our day? I'm very interested in your impressions." "I should have handled the situation with Broker Plichette more adroitly," Paddy said. She was curled into the chair with her feet under her, a silhouette against the twilight glow from the window. "I thought you did as well as you might have done," he commented when she said nothing more. He was bent on creating mischief. You prevented that, demonstrated that you were a serious trader, and gave him an honorable way out of the situation. He sipped his wine. "To be perfectly frank, master to prentice, I'm not certain I would have given him a way out." He has colleagues and associates on port, Paddy protested. We might have lost business from those who would not be offended on my behalf. She sighed and took a gentle sip of wine. Langlast is very promising after our last several ports, she said slowly. I want us to do well. Commendable, Sharon murmured. And I reiterate, you did do well. There was no subtlety you could have deployed which would have turned him from his course. He raised his glass. One cannot finesse a sledgehammer. Paddy grinned suddenly. I thought I'd been too subtle. When he took so long to pick up the hint about the real merchandise, she said, and chuckled. Sharon drew in a soft breath at that chuckle and sipped wine carefully to cover the moment. So then, we'll allow that it went as well as it could have gone, and far better than it might have gone. I commend you on your adroitness, your quick thinking, and your control over your temper. Paddy tipped her head. You didn't do anything, did you, Father? There was nothing for me to do, he said calmly. She snorted lightly. You let me know his state of mind. The state of his emotions, say rather. It was a small thing, and he was broadcasting rather loudly. So my gift, whatever it comes to be, will, perhaps, enhance my ability to trade. It may, he said, moving his shoulders. It may not. I would venture to say that it will not enhance your ability, though it may be occasionally useful in preventing you from being cheated, or getting hit on the head. She was silent, and he caught a strong edge of wistful aversion. So reluctant to accept your nature, Paddy. I don't want to be like Aunt Anthora. That came out in a burst of utter honesty. Sharon blinked and leaned forward to put his glass on the table. Now, I was under the impression that you were rather fond of your Aunt Anthora. I am, but her gift, the burden of her gift, is too much. It made her so... She flailed briefly for a word and finally produced, odd. Sharon sighed. I won't dispute that your aunt is odd, or that her gift is a heavy one. However, as her fond brother and her elder, I may say with authority that she has always been odd. Whether her gift has made her odder, with whom would we compare her? Paddy was silent. Sharon sighed. I think that there is a very good reason why gifts of this sort come to us when we are halfling. Yes, there are hormonal and biologic reasons, but there is also this other reason. By the time we are halflings, our basic nature is formed. Not even the sudden addition of a strange and delightful ability can warp us at the core. Certainly, it's necessary to adapt, but we adapt constantly. And may I say, Corval adapts more quickly than many. The arrival of your gift, in whatever form it takes, can only enhance you. She doubted it still. He felt it. He also felt her want to believe him. It will be well, he said, projecting a strong line of comfort. In fact, I am so certain that it will be well that I propose a wager. She shifted slightly in her chair. What wager? She asked, with the caution of one who had wagered with him before. Sharon grinned. I know you for a careful gambler, so instead of a wager, I'll make a proposal. I propose that, one standard from this day, you will have accepted your gift entirely, and will scarcely remember a time when you wished it at the devil. After a moment, Paddy shook her head. "It's a fine proposal, Father, and one that I would like to embrace, but what if that's not the case?" Shawn took a careful breath, for this was a gamble indeed. "As it happens, while your gift will not diminish you, and this I believe utterly," he allowed his conviction to reach her through their link, "you can choose to be diminished. So if you will have it as a wager in truth, here is the opposite side of the coin. If, in one standard year, it is not as I have proposed, I will myself take you to the healers, and we will together petition them to seal your gift away, and cast the memory of having held it into the deep mists of forgetting." Paddy gasped. "The healers? That is possible?" "In some few cases. I would expect that your Aunt Anthora is one of them, and your Uncle Renzel another. It is not possible, but in most, yes, it can be done. There are, naturally, risks and consequences to taking such an action. These will be explained to you thoroughly. If you petition the healers for this thing." Paddy was silent. He could feel the weight of her thought and was silent, sipping his wine reflectively. "I accept," she said all at once, and Terran Wise leaned toward him with her hand held out. Shawn met her, noting how chill her flesh was, and solemnly shook. "Done," he said.
That was another entry in the complete audiobook serialization of Alliance of Equals by Sharon Lee and Steve Miller. And that's it for the podcast. Thanks to Audible.com and to podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz, and a colossal Dyson sphere filled with the flora and fauna of a galactic empire, all singing musical numbers just like all of nature does when we aren't looking, plus the thanks, praises, and plaudits of grateful readers and fans everywhere to David Weber, Martin Lessum, Christopher Weuve, Anton Peterson, and Arius Kaufmann. And remember that uncompromising honor, David Weber's next entry in the Honorverse, is available in e-art form at BuNine eBooks. Please join us next time here at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.